Hey guys, this is Jeff Stanek with Figured Out Baseball. Got a great Figured Out Baseball podcast today. It's a part two, or at least a round two, with Eddie Smith today. He's the hitting coach at LSU, of course, in the SEC Conference. Coach Smith has been with us once before. If you didn't listen to the first podcast we did together, I would certainly recommend that you do so. It was a great one. Today we're going to follow up with him and just talk about some different things, maybe talk more specific about hitting and some other areas as well. But Coach Smith is known to be an excellent hitting coach, so I'm excited to talk with him about some hitting. In case you didn't listen to the first podcast, I'll give you a quick background on Coach Smith so you have a better idea, where he's been, where he's come from. He's from Olympia, Washington. He played collegiately at Centralia Community College, junior college in Washington State. The team set the school record for wins while he was there in 2004. He then went to Notre Dame to finish his playing career, which was the dream school for him. The team, when he was there, Notre Dame won the Big East Conference Championship twice. They also advanced to 2 NCAA regionals in his time there. He began his coaching career in the spring of 2007, where he began as the director of baseball ops at University of Virginia. He was there until 2011, and he finished up there as the volunteer. He then got the hitting coach job at Santa Clara in 2012. 2013, he spent 1 year coaching at Notre Dame. Then 2014 through 2017, he spent several years as the head coach at Lower Columbia College, a junior college in Longview, Washington. While he was at Lower Columbia, the team won 3 straight conference and regional championships. In 2015, Coach Smith was named the ABCA and Diamond Pacific Association Division National Coach of the Year. 2018 and 2019, Coach Smith spent 2 seasons as the hitting coach and recruiting coordinator at Tulane in New Orleans. While he was there, the team set the conference record for home runs, batting average, runs per game, total runs scored, total bases, slugging percentage, extra base hits, and walks per game. A really unbelievable job with the offense there at Tulane, which led to him being hired in July 2019 as the hitting coach at LSU, where he currently is. Coach Smith has also spent time coaching the USA Baseball, one of the USA Baseball teams. He's also coached nearly 50 Major League draft picks and 14 major leaguers under his belt. Unbelievable resume here from Eddie Smith. And Coach Smith, I just appreciate you taking some time to be on a podcast with us again today.
Hey, Jeff, excited to be here. Always enjoy it.
Last time that we did this, I started with something that sort of stood out from your bio, and I want to start out with something different today that we did not talk about last time, but that I think is interesting, and I'm interested to hear I guess how and why this came to be. But I found out between the last podcast and this one, just did a little more reading on you and found out that you got your degree from Notre Dame in Spanish. And I'm interested to know why that is, if there's any particular reason that you decided that's what you were going to study in school.
There's probably a lot of things that went into that, Jeff, and maybe more than anything, just kind of where life and the wind blew me over time. I had a wonderful Spanish teacher in high school who, kind of got me involved in the subject, and it always kind of came easy. I had a wonderful teacher at the junior college that I went to, and when it came time to start really making decisions about what to finish my degree in, I always seen myself becoming a teacher and coaching sports at the high school level, and Spanish was something that came very easy to me. And when all was said and done, and it was time to finish up my degree and finish those last 2 years of school, where everything's concentrated more on your major, it just sort of became that way. And I think in the back of my mind there were 2 other factors that kind of played in that. One was obviously in the game of baseball, in the sport of baseball, a lot of Spanish-speaking players out there, especially when you talk about the professional level and when you look at the footprint of the sport worldwide. I thought that, hey, who knows where life's going to take me. Maybe this will come in handy on that side of things one day. And then, the other piece is personally, I enjoy traveling. It's something that I like to do in my personal time, is get out and see the world a little bit, and just being able to have another language it really unlocks several places in the world to be able to go travel on your own and maybe not have that language barrier stop you from doing some things.
I was wondering if the baseball part of it came into it. That's I'm I'm glad, or else I would have wasted the first question of the podcast. But I'm curious, is because I read that you've done some international coaching. You've coached in the Dominican, in Aruba, in Japan. Would you mind talking about those opportunities at all? And I guess at least in the Dominican, how much it helped you that you were fluent in Spanish?
Well, I think that one thing that's really cool about coaching is that the opportunities that come up along the way, you never really know when they're kind of come up, but the chances to go coach internationally, there's nothing like seeing the game played in different parts of the world. Every part of the world has its own little flavor, and it's really cool to see the differences, but the way that the game is also the same, and how the game can bring people together who have seemingly nothing else in common. The game of baseball, you put some bases 90 feet apart and you throw a round ball out there, and all of a sudden everybody speaks the same language. And it's been some really special experiences for me. As you mentioned, I've been to Russia, I've been to Japan, I've been to Aruba and the Dominican Republic, all by the means of the game of baseball. And, those experiences for me have been, not only baseball experiences, but some of those most powerful life experiences that I've had. You bring up specifically that Dominican Republic experiences, and I've now been to the island 5 times and visited that country 5 times, 4 for baseball. I've got people down there that I would consider friends. In fact, last time I went, my wife and I just went on a vacation, and it was a last-second trip, got a great flight, and we showed up maybe 2 or 3 days later. I didn't even tell anybody because I wasn't sure exactly what we were going to do, and ended up knocking on the door of a friend of mine, and we went out for dinner that night. So, those trips have been incredible. The Spanish piece, being able to speak the language has allowed me to do some things in the Dominican Republic, at least, that I wouldn't be able to do otherwise. There's no doubt. In those trips, there's been times where I've had to go, with a group of 30, 40 people, and maybe be the lone bilingual person in the group, and kind of been the translator for the English-speaking group, and worked together with the team that we're going to play, where, maybe they don't have anybody who speaks English well enough to get the game started. So, those experiences are neat. They're fun. They bring people together from different backgrounds, and I really feel thankful for all those experiences.
The Spanish-speaking part is certainly something that I think, if there are any young coaches listening to this, or even a player that thinks they might want to coach someday, I can't imagine that having a Spanish-speaking, having that be part of your schooling, even if it's just through high school, 4 years of high school. But if you can, minor in Spanish or something along those lines, I can't imagine that wouldn't help you. At some point there's got to be a job that would be opened, and if you can put on your resume that you also speak Spanish, I've got to believe that's going to help with, junior colleges that might recruit, Dominican players, kids from Puerto Rico, that are kids from South America. As a junior college coach, and I don't know if Lower Columbia was like this at all, but as the junior college that I coached in Iowa, we had a lot of Spanish-speaking players on our team, and it was at that time I thought, boy, I wish I had done some more studying in Spanish, and had I kept coaching, I think that's something that I would have attempted to do at some point, just because I feel like it's going to come up at some point in recruiting and be a weapon for you as a coach. I'd like to just flip the switch a little bit, Eddie, and just talk about hitting with you, because I'd like to spend a lot of this podcast talking about hitting. It's one of the areas you're most well known for. Obviously, you are the hitting coach at LSU. And it's something that I'm passionate about talking and learning about, even though I'm not on the field coaching anymore. It's still something I like to talk about and learn. I'd like to talk first with you a little bit just about the overall offensive philosophy, overall offensive approach at LSU, and maybe sort of what you want your team's offensive identity to be. For example, when you're talking to your whole team, are there any absolutes, any sort of principles, any just anything in particular that you want every player at LSU to be known for, or you want the overall LSU offense to be known for, so when a team plays you, they know LSU offense is going to be good at this, this, and this every year, regardless of who's there, because this is what you believe is most important. And just some things that my teams have done in the past is just we wanted to play hard all the time, wanted to run down the line full speed, make difficult outs. We wanted to be good at taking extra bases when they were there. We wanted to be good at two-strike approach and be very difficult outs when we got to two strikes, and just things like that. I think are philosophies that a lot of teams have. Can you talk about LSU and your offense there, and just, if you have anything, overall offensive trademarks that you want the Tigers to be known for?
I think when you talk about the entire offense, the first thing that comes to my mind is, we call it own the zone. Get a good pitch to hit. And when the pitcher leaves the zone with balls, make sure we're not chasing pitches. I think that's a key component to good hitting. It's just, you look at the numbers, they're staggering as far as when players hit balls that are in the strike zone compared to when players hit balls that are not in the strike zone. The statistics are just night and day. You hit a pitch that's in the strike zone, and all of a sudden an average hitter turns really good if you only look at his statistics when they're in the strike zone. And we have that technology now to be able to do that and evaluate it that way. And on the other side of that, in most cases, really good hitters are not very good when you look only at how they hit when the pitch is not in the strike zone. So we do a lot of work on trying to own the zone, trying to make sure that we have a mindset, have an approach, make it a priority in order to swing at pitches that we can be successful at.
How much time do you spend with each player, maybe even particularly when they're new into the program, just gathering statistics for them to look at and be able to visually show them, that you handled this pitch? Because sometimes I'm sure players probably have a little bit of a misconception in their mind of what pitches they handle, what they don't. How much time do you spend on that individually, Eddie, just working with your individual hitters, particularly when they first get into the program, for them to really hone in on and be able to see for themselves that the damage they're able to do with pitches in different zones? And how do you do so?
That's a really good question, Jeff. What I would say on that is, when players first get into our program, it's going to take at least a year for us to have enough of a sample size to be able to say, hey, you split the zone up into 9 different regions. Hey, this is your hot zone and this is your cold zone. I mean, I think one of the challenges we have right now that I see is everybody wants to be data driven, and that's wonderful, especially when you have the kind of data sets that major league organizations have. But I see it also being absolutely distorted and abused. When you have an understanding of how statistics work, if you want to sit there and you only want to take, let's say, 50 batted balls, and divide that up by 9 different zones, and say, hey, this guy hit 667 in this zone here, but he only hit 200 in this zone here. Well, if he was 2 for 3 in the zone where he hit 667 and 1 for 5 in the zone where he hit 200, you can understand that all of a sudden one of those hits flipping into an out, or one of those outs flipping into a hit, totally changes the batting average in that zone, or the OPS, or however you evaluate it. So, I think what we have to do as college coaches is evaluate it more from the side of the visual and trusting our gut than having the luxury of thousands of data points to be able to sit there and say, hey, print out somebody's TrackMan data over the course of 5 years of their minor league development, say, hey, you were really good in these four pieces of the zone, and these 3 pieces of the zone you weren't, so we're going to really shrink your zone to this. We're going to have that same sort of conversation with players, but for us it's going to be a lot more based off of visuals, based off of video and specific pitches, and saying, hey, that's a chase right there. Identify it, know it, what happened, why did that happen, what can we do to make sure that going forward we're attacking are parts of the zone. And so I wish we had that luxury, but the reality is we don't. When you understand data, it's important to know that. And so we've got to rely a lot more on gut feel and interactive conversations with the players to understand what they're thinking and what they're seeing, and try to make them better at understanding their zones that way.
So once you have a basic understanding of that, and again, you're having conversations with an individual player, how does the count affect what that approach is, how much that zone shrinks or expands? Like, does it shrink and expand pitch to pitch? For example, you have a hitter, he's in the box, ball one, it's 1-0. Does his zone shrink a little bit? Does it shrink a little more when it's 2-0? If it goes to 0-1, does it expand a little bit, or does it not expand until there are 2 strikes? Just sort of curious about how, sort of as the count progresses, as the hitter's ahead or behind, if that affects the size of the zone that you, again, having conversations with your players to have them be as successful as possible, if it shrinks or expands their zone as far as what they're looking for and what pitches they will swing at.
We like to make that as simple as possible for our players. And what we tell our players is that, hey, there's either 2 strikes on you or there are not. And when there are less than 2 strikes on you, I want you having the same mindset in a 2-0 count as you would have in an 0-0 count, and as you would have in an 0-1 count, and as you would have in a 3-1 count. I want that to be a controlled aggression. I want that to be obviously within your strike zone, your attacking zone, and that's when you have less than 2 strikes on you. I know that, in a lot of years, in the recent years, there's been a lot of traction to this concept of shrinking the zone with 2 strikes, and I totally understand it. Pitching is at an incredible point right now, and I think that it's only going to continue to develop. And you see it in the major leagues where you've got I think it was over 250 guys threw a pitch over 98 miles an hour last year or something like that. You're only going to see velocities increase. You're only going to see breaking balls get sharper and spin better as we start to understand this stuff better. And so I understand, by shrinking the zone, you're chasing less. I think that at the college level still, we can't convert to that way of thinking. I think in the college game, there's a difference. In the professional game, there's a feeling among a lot of teams that a strikeout is just another out. And I certainly understand that, especially with a guy who hits 30 or 40 home runs a year at the major league level. But, at the major league level in 2018, 30 teams fielded over 980 fielding percentage. That's every team in the league. At the college level that same year, only 15 of 300 teams fielded at the 980 mark. And 14 of those 15 teams played on a home field that was turf. And so I say all that to say college defenses are not even close to major league defenders. And when you put balls in play in college, things happen. And so in the college game, we've got to put balls in play. We can't strike out at the college level, okay? And that's a major difference between Major League Baseball and college baseball. And so we've got to put balls in play. We also have a factor that the college strike zone is not the same as the Major League strike zone. At Alex Box Stadium, since TrackMan was put in, 35% of called strikes were not in the strike zone according to TrackMan. So as college coaches, we've got to develop our players to understand what is being called a strike in the college game. And so we have to expand our zone slightly with 2 strikes, especially for a guy who is already a very particular and selective hitter. And so, with 2 strikes, we will make that adjustment. We like to say, hey, we got to foul off the pitcher's pitch. We will still take sure balls, understanding that, hey, the pitch that is not on the batter's box chalk line, but is outside and off the plate in college baseball, that is a pitch that's going to be called a strike. We've got to be able to foul that pitch off, even though it's not a strike in the TrackMan strike zone, it's a strike in college baseball. We've got to be able to foul that pitch off. And so that's the adjustment that we'll make with 2 strikes. And we always like to say, hey, pitcher makes a pitcher's pitch, you foul it off, and then you drive the pitcher's mistake.
Are there any physical adjustments that guys make with 2 strikes? Or is there a change in mentality other than, swinging at a pitch that's maybe going to get called a strike, like you mentioned? Is there any sort of change in mentality, physically, guys in the box? Are they moving up on the plate? Are they spreading their feet out? Are they getting rid of leg kicks? Are they choking up? Or are they, anything like that? Or even like the timing of their pitch? I know a lot of coaches, 2-strike approach is to, be ready be on time for a fastball away and adjust fastball in, adjust off speed. Do you guys do any of that stuff? Any sort of approach change physically or mentally with 2 strikes?
That's an individual thing for every guy on our team that we'll try to figure out if they need to make any of those adjustments. A guy who's very selective at the plate will really emphasize, hey, now you got to expand your zone with 2 strikes. A guy who doesn't strike out a whole lot at all, doesn't chase pitches, period. We're not going to tell him, hey, you need to expand your zone. He's showing that he already has that kind of plate discipline. If he shows that over the course of a fall or, a couple of seasons that he's not striking out a lot, we're not going to sit there and tell him to change anything. So every individual is going to be different with that. Some guys will choke up. Some guys will make conscious efforts to shorten their swing, whatever it might be. But, again, that's an individual thing for sure.
And as far as what pitches you're swinging at with 2 strikes, I'm sure that you're familiar with a lot of umpires that you get. Does it change game to game based on who's behind the plate? If a pitch is, if you determine that this particular pitch is getting called a strike today, do you have a conversation in the dugout sometimes with guys like, hey, this is being called a strike today, so there's no excuse not to swing at that. You've got to swing at it with 2 strikes because you know it's going to get called. Do you have those conversations with guys? Does it change depending on who's behind the plate and what that particular strike zone is that day? Because like you said, it's not a strike on TrackMan, but if the umpire says it's a strike, it is a strike. Does that change umpire to umpire, zone to zone?
We have a lot of information about that sort of thing, but my feeling is that hitting is so hard, maybe the hardest thing to do in all of sports, that, we prepare for this day in and day out. We take rounds during our batting practice every single day that are 2-strike rounds. And hitting's hard enough as it is. If you're trying to make the adjustment of, hey, the strike zone's a little bit bigger today, I need to swing at a pitch that's an inch outside of where I would usually swing at, and you're facing a guy who's throwing 95 to 97 miles an hour with a plus breaking ball, I think that's impossible. So I like to have just a really good foundation for our guys, something that we work on every single day, and you hope that you prepare really well, and you hope that you execute really well, and over the course of time, you feel like if you can really stick to your plan, the game is going to reward you.
I'd like to talk a little more, Eddie, about individual approaches. When an individual steps to the plate, I think most coaches would agree that to have success, he should have a plan as far as what pitches he's swinging at, which we've already kind of covered a little bit. Now, as far as what the player is trying to do with the ball, as far as guys trying to drive the ball over the fence, other guys that they might feel like a strength is to just hit line drives and use the whole field. What are kind of conversations you have with players about that to try to get them to understand their individual strengths and ultimately come up with an approach that's going to work for them in a game? What are conversations that you have with guys to help them determine that? Because sometimes I feel like players, and maybe it's different at your level in a Power 5 type conference, but sometimes players don't always have sometimes players try to do more than they're capable of, or they think that they're a different player than maybe what you see. For example, a guy might think he's got a lot of power, but in your eyes, like for him to have success, he needs to try to hit more line drives, more doubles, as opposed to trying to hit, 30 degree, 40 degree balls in the air that are going to go out when he squares it, but when they're not, they're out. Can you talk about conversations you have with guys just about setting an individual approach for themselves that's going to be successful for them as much as possible, make them the most successful hitters they can be?
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that stuff's important. With that said, I tend to start 98% of players on the exact same plan, and very few of them do I ever really deviate from this plan. I think that a great neutral starting point is if, as a hitter, you can just think about hitting every ball right past the pitcher's ear. And I think that provides a lot of margin for error. The reality as a hitter is that your timing is rarely going to be perfect. Your contact point is rarely going to be perfect. So when you're slightly imperfect, can you still be successful? How good can your misses be? Because all of a sudden now, if you're putting balls in play and, hey, 15% of those balls that you put in play are perfect as far as the timing and the contact point, hey, can you at least have 50% of those balls that are close enough perfect that they're still going to put a lot of pressure on the defense? And my feeling is that, hey, when you're thinking, I'm going to hit the ball right past the pitcher's ear, okay, if you're slightly under that ball, you got a chance for a ball to be the ball that goes off or over the fence. When you're slightly on top of the ball, that's that one hop ground ball that gets through the infield a lot of the time. When you're slightly early, it's the ball that goes right over the pull side infielder's head. And when you're slightly behind, late, it goes right over that opposite infielder's head. And, there will be some adjustments to this. Again, it's probably on our team, there's probably 3 guys that I can think of that we really have any other approach of other than hit it right past the pitcher's ear. One guy is in his 3rd year. He's a guy that we aren't afraid to let him get the barrel out a little bit. Obviously, fences are a little bit shorter. When you're not in the middle of the field, this guy has an incredible eye. He doesn't swing and miss very much. And so we aren't afraid to let him cheat a little bit. He's a guy who we aren't afraid to let him get the barrel out and tell him, hey, you hit this ball right over the pull side infielder's head. That's your goal as a hitter. And all of a sudden, when you're a little bit early, okay, this is a ball that's going to maybe go into the corner, but when you're under it, you're going to hit more balls into the seats because the fences are a little shorter that part of the field. We have another guy who's just a really, really scrappy hitter, and I don't know if he'll hit a home run in his time here, and that's fine. But he's also a guy who will run a consistent 4-0, 4-1 down the line. His ground balls, 1, they get through the infield a lot. 2, every time he hits a ground ball, it puts all the pressure in the world on the defense. And so a guy like him, we say to him, hey, hit this ball right off the pitcher's shin area, right past the pitcher's shin, as opposed to the ear, just hoping to get less balls in the air for him. And then we have another guy who is one of the strongest guys I've ever been around. But, we don't even change that, get the ball past the pitcher's ear with him, even though he has power that is the most elite power that I've been around in my time in coaching. And the reason why with him we don't change it is that, hey, if we start thinking hit balls in the air, the swing gets long. And from start to contact, all of a sudden, that time takes a long time for him to get there. Well, we need him to be as short to the ball as possible because we need him to get his barrel to the baseball. And when he's short to the baseball, he has the highest rate of barrel that he possibly can. And for a guy who's that strong, when he gets his barrel to the ball, great things happen. And so for me, if you can just think, hey, line drive right past the pitcher's ear as a hitter, that's a really, really good starting point. If you start developing to a point where, you're 23, 24, 25 years old and you're in professional baseball and they start working with you on getting balls up and over the fence and that being a part of your consistent plan day in and day out, that's wonderful. But, even a couple of years ago, I was part of a team that we finished in the top 5 in the country in home runs, extra base hits, and hit for all the power in the world. We never had one guy on that roster, including a guy who ended up being a first-round pick and for a lot of the season led the country in home runs. We never talked about hitting anything other than a line drive right past the pitcher. And I just think for kids and even most players all the way through professional baseball, that approach just goes a really, really long way for you.
What you're saying is amazing to me because it's so contradictory to most of the noise that you hear on social media. Now, let me preface by saying that guys like you and a lot of guys that are in your position aren't posting a lot on social media. The guys that are posting on social media are different. They work with different players. They have different objectives. But this is not what you're hearing, not what you're seeing a lot of. And it's fun for me to hear what a guy that coaches at your level teaches and talks about with your players. And part of the reason we do these podcasts, Eddie, is because I want to help hitting coaches at lower levels to be able to know what's happening at higher levels. Because again, if you listen to the noise on social media, you don't hear what you're talking about right now. So I want to just take the last few minutes of the podcast to sort of expand on that if we can. But I'm going to ask you sort of like an adjacent question for a minute. I think a lot of people would hear what you're saying and think, well, if I'm going to get drafted, and if I'm going to get drafted in power as part of my game, I need to think about hitting the ball in the air. If I'm a power guy and I'm thinking about hitting, head high a ball past the pitcher's ear, I'm not using my best tool, and it's going to affect me in the draft. Obviously, you have guys at LSU that are being drafted as hitters. Can you just talk about your thoughts there? And obviously, you talk to major league scouts about your own players, and you've been just in this game for a long time. You've had a lot of guys drafted. For someone that would have that thought process that I just said, that even a guy that is coaching or that's giving lessons that thinks I need to teach these kids to hit the ball in the air if they're going to get recruited to LSU, if they're going to get drafted. I've got to teach these high school kids even to hit the ball in the air more. But again, it's not what you're talking about. How would you, what conversation would you have with that person, or how would you, I guess, react to that thought? Because I think this is a really important thing in youth baseball today in coaching hitters.
Absolutely. There's no question it is, because you hear about it a lot in the major leagues, and at the major league level, it's certainly understandable as to why you want to hit so many balls in the air and hit balls that are extra base hits. I think there's many things that go into that and how that impacts a youth player, a high school player, a college player. The first thing I will start with is one of the first rules in scouting is that power is always the last tool to come. Power is the last tool to come. The story is as old as time of the kid who, gets drafted at 18 years old or 21 years old and doesn't have a whole lot of power but is a good hitter, and all of a sudden out of nowhere he goes up, and by the time he's 25 years old the man muscles have developed a little or a lot more, and this guy is a middle of the lineup hitter in the major leagues. It's always the last tool to come. And so I think it's so important that when we're working with hitters who are in their developing stages of their careers, we teach them to be wholesome hitters that have a strong fundamental base, hitters that can really control the barrel, hitters that can be on the barrel consistently, hitters that can control the strike zone. I think that's where for 99.9% of high school players, you hit fly balls at 95% of your maximum exit velocity, and they're fly ball outs. That's a reality of it. I go see this at high school games all the time. And so it's important to understand that, hits for most players are going to be a lower trajectory than a fly ball. And it's important to understand that if you can't produce at the level you're playing at right now, whether that's your high school JV team, you're not going to advance to the next level, your high school varsity team. If it's, your high school varsity team, if you can't produce, hard hit balls, a good batting average, you're probably not going to be able to do that in college either. And if you can't do it in college, you're not going to get drafted. And if you can't produce in single A, you're not going to get promoted to double A very often. And, if you can't produce in double A, you're not going to get called up to the big leagues. And so it's so important to, you always have to have an eye on the future and the player that you see yourself becoming down the road. But more importantly, you got to produce where your feet are right now. And I think when you look at the best players, at the highest levels that I've ever been around, they produce in the moment where they are right now. And they work on being the best player that they are among their peers right then. And then they just keep doing that level after level after level. And then the last thing I'd say along those lines is if you really take a deep look into it, one of the most important things out there for college hitters, if you look at the research over the last 5 years, is what I have researched. If you look at college hitters who are drafted in the top 10 rounds, they walk more than they strike out, and they don't strike out much. And so it shows elite control of the zone. It also shows that they just the myth of the guy who strikes out a lot and hits but still has a lot of power. There just are so few of those guys who get drafted that it just doesn't happen. And so trading strikeouts and with the eternal hope for power, it's not being rewarded by the major league draft. It is at the major league level for some guys, but those guys, that is the top 1% of 1% hitters in the world when it comes to power. And in order to get there, in my opinion, you got a lot easier path to get there by being a complete ball player. One, certainly being a hitter that has a good foundation and is a good fundamental hitter and can get on the barrel a lot and doesn't strike out a lot. Also being a great teammate, also being a player who has a defensive position that's something other than DH, hopefully something in the middle of the field, and a good base runner and all those things. That's going to be your path to professional baseball before just being a big slugger is.
An awesome answer. I've got one more question for you, I promise. Last one. I want to address this because I do think it's important for someone out there that wants to be a really good hitting coach. I think you've got to hear from really good hitting coaches. How much is launch angle and attack angle a part of your language when you're talking with hitters? Because I feel, as someone who just likes to observe on social media, that's there are a lot of people that feel like it's extremely important for players to hear and talk about and understand. But all the conversation that we've had has been much, much simpler cues and, giving guys visuals of hitting a ball, hitting a line drive past the pitcher's ear or hitting a line drive past the pitcher's shin. How much is our launch angle and attack angle a part of your verbiage to your players?
The actual number of a launch angle or an attack angle, it's not ever something that we bring up to a player in a teaching situation. We do talk high line drive, the ball right past the pitcher's ear. In our batting cages, one of the coolest things that we were able to do here is on the back wall of our batting cage, we painted a line that's right at 10 degrees of a launch angle. And I only know that it's 10 degrees because I was curious one day and I went and walked it all off and did the measurements and figured out that was 10 degrees. It's something where, hey, this yellow line that we have that is 12 inches thick on the back wall of our batting cage, hey, hit the ball off the yellow line. Not steering it there, just crushing balls right off the yellow line. Just as a visual for the guys of, hey, when you hit balls right there at that height, great things happen for you. And so rarely do we, I would say even almost never do we say, hey, that ball right there, that's 12-degree launch angle, or that ball is 36-degree launch angle, or 22-degree launch angle. We just use the soft visuals a lot more often of the pitcher's shin, the pitcher's ear, the yellow line in our batting cages as visuals for our hitters to understand kind of, hey, that's what a good ball flight looks like. With attack angle, I'd say the best thing I would say with attack angle is that, hey, when you're hammering a nail into a 2x4, if you miss that nail to the top, that nail's not going to go in very well. If you miss that nail because you're coming up from the bottom, that nail's not going to go in very well. When you're hitting, you want that hammer to go right through that nail. And that's an analogy that we'll use with our guys all the time. Hey, straight to that baseball and straight through that baseball. I think attack angle sometimes gets distorted because certainly there's a slight uphill movement when you're matching the plane of the baseball, when you're getting right hammer to the nail, But what I see distorted so often is that people try to manufacture this uphill movement by having the first movement in their swing be hands going down and then working up. And when we talk about, the barrel path, which naturally is attack angle, what we want to emphasize is, hey, go to the baseball, then through the baseball. As you start to approach contact to that baseball, that's when you start getting your barrel through that baseball, and that's when your attack angle might increase a little bit. The last thing I would say with all of this is when it comes to launch angle and attack angle, okay, more hitters err on the side of hitting too many balls in the air. So naturally, we might try to emphasize them hitting balls a little bit lower so that they overemphasize hitting a line drive that is maybe 0 to 10 degrees, which in turn maybe produces more line drives in that honey hole of 15 to 25 degrees, And when it comes to attack angle, more hitters swing uphill than hitters that chop down on the baseball. And so there's probably more emphasis on guys going straight to the baseball than there is, hey, get straight to that baseball and then start going uphill. Every individual's a little bit different with that, but I'm just saying if you have 100 hitters lined up that are, used to college level hitters, you're probably going to have 80 to 90 of those hitters who hit a few too many balls in the air and have a little bit too much uphill in their swing, as opposed to guys who hit too many balls on the ground and too much downhill in their swing, in my experience.
What an awesome conversation, and I wish we could keep going for another hour or two. This is Eddie Smith, everybody. He's the hitting coach at LSU, and this conversation has been profoundly simple. The way that you teach hitting and talk about hitting, it's like you make it too simple. It sounds like, anybody can do this. Anybody can teach what you're talking about and have success with it, and why people want to make it as complex as they do sometimes. Listening to you, it's like, why would you need to make it more complex? And this has been truly great. I think what an amazing resource for Figured Out Baseball subscribers to be able to listen to you, Coach Smith. So I want to thank you so much for being a part of the podcast today for a second time. And maybe there's a time, sometime down the road we can get you on here for the third one, because I had several things I had written down that I wanted to get into that we didn't have time today. But I thank you for the time you did put in, and just want to wish you and your team all the luck in the world. And hopefully we see you guys out in the field this spring.
Well, I sure appreciate the time, Jeff. And, hey, we've done two. We might as well go for the trifecta here soon. So have a great holiday, and hope all the listeners out there have a great holiday season. And, hey, spring's right around the corner.